political commentators today. It's Dale Husband and Liam Hehir. Kia ora korua, welcome both. Thank you.
Kia ora, Kathryn. Tēnā koe, Liam. Hi there.
Great to have you both with us. Okay, it's been a recess week. They're always funny old weeks for domestic politics. But the Prime Minister was overseas, part of the APEC and ASEAN meetings, and he got his handshake, the grip and grin they call it, with the President of the United States, Donald Trump. There wasn't exactly a particularly strong message conveyed, Liam, in the brief time they had together, but he did seem to make a connection. And is that perhaps what matters most in the first instance?
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, which isn't very far, it's one of those things where, for a New Zealand Prime Minister, the chances are of getting it wrong and making a bad impression are far more likely than the prospect of somehow forging a strong connection right away. So I mean, he's Luxon, I think, kind of won by default. There will be people in New Zealand who will be annoyed that he didn't upbraid or somehow antagonise Trump, but you know, Luxon did the job that all New Zealand prime ministers do when they're overseas. He followed the diplomatic protocol. He made a good impression, if not a fantastic one.
Your take, Dale?
Oh, I don't know. It hardly should lead our news, the fact that Luxon saw a bloke who was more interested in his hair. I'd too like to compliment our Prime Minister's hairdresser too. Amazing. And I suppose, in a way, encouraging that Trump knows where New Zealand is, bearing in mind maps that he would read would be clouded out by his ego.
What did also happen and has been happening quietly behind the scenes, and I asked whether any of this is going to benefit the Prime Minister at all, he's made a bit of progress with the EU in terms of trying to bring in a wider trading partnership, one that fully respects the rules, and that can perhaps provide a bit of a buffer to whatever happens going forward with tariffs. Does he get enough credit for that, Liam? And certainly does your average voter notice it or pay any attention?
It's incredibly important work, you know, and for a trading nation like New Zealand, the idea of more and more diversification is better. And, you know, we need to have these counterweights to the Chinese and US dominated systems. And for that, Luxon will get the usual amount of credit from New Zealand voters for foreign affairs, which is zero. He'll get no credit for it, because New Zealanders, like most people around the world, are intensely focused on domestic matters. There was a poll in August from Ipsos, and foreign affairs, defence was the priority for 2% of New Zealand voters. 55% were instead focused on the cost of living, inflation, and so on and so forth. So a lot of what the government does that's really important to the country happens, you know, without a lot of engagement from voters, which you can see as a negative in some ways. But the reality is that actually that space allows for a large degree of bipartisanship and a large degree of common sense. In fact, it kind of removes a lot of the formative stuff and allows prime ministers to work effectively in the background. So he'll get no credit for it, but it's good for New Zealand nevertheless.
I mean, exports make up a huge amount of our economic activity and income, Dale. We're a tiny little country, unlike the United States, with over 300 million people. And again, is there any kind of thanks for grinding away on some of those foundational things? And perhaps does the Prime Minister feel a bit miffed when there's not more recognition of that?
Oh, well, I'd like to recognise him too. Look, that's tough turf, and trying to create markets for our exporters is important. So, you know, you've got to give him credit where it's due. He's a personable sort of character too, Luxon, so establishing some relationships are important. But there are important issues as well about the protection of intellectual property and issues pertaining to home here. But, you know, as a face in these international fora, I suppose that, like I say, he's making some connections, some contacts, and hopefully enhances the opportunity for New Zealand producers and exporters to get their wares worldwide.
Let's talk about what did happen in a rather unusual way at the start of last week. It was a short week, remember. It came out on the Tuesday. A long-awaited decision on what Labour was going to do about tax reform. Was it going to do capital gains? Was it going to do wealth? And what has been called a limited capital gains policy is what emerged, but in a rather bizarre way, which we touched on last week. What of the substance of the policy itself, Liam? From a perspective of trying to introduce a new tax but do it in a way that doesn't see them, being slammed one way or another, did they get it right, or have they been a bit gutless, as some would say?
So this is the fourth iteration, right, of Labor proposing a capital gains tax, and it has the most chance of not being the fourth failure. Right, so we've had 3 goes at it already where Labor said this was the circuit breaker. Journalists sort of speculated on whether or not it was going to reshape the economic debate, and each time the different tactic failed. And so, you might be tempted to think that the same will happen here. But the reason why it might have more of a chance of success is that it is limited in nature. I mean, you can't really call it a capital gains tax. You really should call it a property gains tax. And the exemptions will take some of the heat out of it. So, for example, farmland being excluded entirely will neuter a lot of sort of protests from the rural sector, which is disproportionately strong as a voice in New Zealand. So the other thing is, of course, is that the reasons why it failed in the last go was because Labor relied on centrist partners to agree to it, and they effectively had a veto, New Zealand First in particular. Whereas New Zealand politics, the landscape has changed, and now we have these a left and a right bloc and no one in the middle. So TPM and the Greens are not going to veto Labor's CGT. I mean, they would probably like it to be stronger, but they're not going to veto it. So I think, it wasn't rolled out in the best possible way. It's the weakest form of the tax, but it probably has the best chance of success.
Dale?
Yeah, well, at least they're saying something, and I think that New Zealand voters have been frustrated that they've been sitting on their hands, really, refusing to release any policy. As Liam touched on, the outcome of the next election, it just feels as though it's going to be razor sharp and close again, and so getting some sort of combined approaches in that centre-left bloc is going to be absolutely vital. We know it doesn't go as far as the Greens would want, but certainly there are many hard-working New Zealanders who feel aggrieved, and justifiably so too, when they hear of people making a swag of dosh out of home ownership, multiple homes and the like, while they're slaving away and getting whacked by their weekly tax takes. So, look, at least it's something, but not elaborating on it until closer to the election is frustrating. And also, the way that it came out, having been leaked too, should be of concern to Chris Hipkins. But it's something on the table anyway to consider as we go into 26.
There's a lot of questions left around it, Liam. Although, again, given it's contained to investors, it's not on farms, it's not on the family home, it's sort of contained to those who own investment properties. But still, here's some of the issues raising already. Okay, you're a first home buyer, you bought at the peak of the market in the capital in 2021, your job's gone, you've got to go and get a job somewhere else and you rent out your home. Is that going to be caught by a capital gains tax? This is where it goes wider than that, than those boomer landlords that people are struggling to have sympathy for.
No. Well, it's still got a main home exception, right? So it's.
But what's a main home? What's a main home? If you're living away from your main home and renting it out,
we have that in the system already, right? So. It's not a fundamental change to the architecture we already have. We have a bright line test at the moment, which is currently 2 years. And basically what Labor are saying is that it will be indefinite. It won't be for 2 years. It'll be forever. And it will be at a flat rate of 28% rather than your marginal tax rate. So, I think it's actually what they've done is it's the next step from extending the bright line to 10 years, which is what they did last time, is to basically make it permanent. So, I'm opposed to it. Don't get me wrong, but I think that the way that they've approached it is smart. And maybe it's the thin end of the wedge, the foot in the door to later expand it. But a lot of the complication with CGD comes about things like how do you apply it to business assets, right? To shares, to rural property. They've really just kept it on second, residential properties and homes, second and subsequent homes. So I don't think it's going to be as hard to bat questions back as has been the case in the past.
What of the not ruling out of further taxes, Dale, is that Was that just fundamental? You don't rule things in or out anymore. They've done plenty of ruling out of CGTs in the past, and then they're stuck with that decision. But will there still be questions that an opposition will seek to raise around whether Labour's got more taxes planned?
Oh, well, no one's going to say that they've got more taxes planned, and I think the Prime Minister's on our bulletin top of the hour there, Kathryn, saying exactly that. It's very difficult to pose a question to any politician saying, will you rule out further taxes? Obviously, they're very hesitant and would go all coy. So, sadly, taxes, like death, are inevitable, and I don't think there's anyone in Parliament or any leader of any party that would rule out further taxes in the future.
Well, ahead of the election, I guess, is the key point. Let's talk about the Greens' reaction to this as well, and Chris Hipkins' reaction to the Greens' reaction. Let's talk about the dynamics that are happening for that centre-left bloc. We know the polls have got the centre-left and the centre-right parties even Stevens. So there's a lot of focus coming on how those parties are going to relate to each other. Not as intense as there will be nearer the election time. But what did you make of the Greens' reaction to this? And then Labour's Chris Hipkins pretty quickly shutting down the idea that this was just the starting point for a negotiation. Liam?
No different to how Luxon had to deal with Seymour and Peters in the lead up to the last election, where, and particularly around the Treaty Principles Bill, where Seymour said, "Look, it's we'll push it. I think we'll get it past the second reading. We'll negotiate." And Luxon said, "Nope." And there was a lot of speculation about whether or not that sort of lack of coherence, that lack of cohesion between the coalition partners would make it all unworkable, and it hasn't. And that's what's changed about New Zealand politics, is we have much less demand for unity and cohesion. So in the same way, I think the dynamic will be that the coalition partners will maintain their positions, and they'll be quite pointed about each other, and voters won't be as bothered as they might have been in the past. I don't know if that's just how we've responded and evolved in relation to MMP, but it's not like it used to be where you had to present a united front. There's much more tolerance for disagreement.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there, Liam. And that centre-left bloc, they've got a lot of work to do, but it would be encouraging signs that the CGT has even been proposed by Labour, even though it's thin on detail. The Greens favouring a wider wealth tax. Well, these are two strong positions. And, of course, we've still got Te Pāti Māori to put their perspective into the mix. But I do agree with Liam. You can go into an election with points that you say you're not willing to compromise on, and post-election, do exactly that.
Let's talk about the other issue in terms of the centre-left, this deepening issue, and Wati has been leading the news on this, Dale. What is happening within that party in terms of what seems to be a deepening split? How are you reading where things are at, please?
Oh, well, just, in whānau and in marae discussions, everyone's got alternate opinions. It does appear to be a power play, though, doesn't it? And how it will be resolved is going to be very interesting. We've got commentary coming out through social media about, want to get back to the roots of when the party was formed.
It was a co-founder of the party, I think. I think who said that in one instance and called for John Tamihere to go as president.
Yeah, but yesterday's news really, and it was an opinion rather than any real move by those
Agreed.
who have the right to vote. It's all going to come down to the AGM. Tamihere is a savvy political operator, and you've got to give him credit. They've got 6 seats. He'll be wanting to protect them. There does appear to be some who want to advance, but a lot of those pushing that way are relatively newcomers to the political environment, and I'd be backing the experience this time around. Look, politics, you're not always popular with everybody, but ultimately it's going to come down to the numbers, and we'll see how all that unfolds in the AGM. Kathryn, I've been asking down these lanes as well, trying to get a better feel for what is going on, and I'm getting stonewalled somewhat, saying that it's a process that's going to work out internally. There's talk of petitions, there's talk of legal action. It's still got a ways to play out, but I did speak with Baden Barber, the spokesperson for the Iwi Chairs Forum, and in an unusual move, they've called for a hui, which seemingly the top brass of Te Pāti Māori are willing to partake in. And that's a bit of a departure. So important to a Māori future, this party is seen by the iwi Leaders Forum that they have, in unison, called for a hui to see if they can clear up what many are painting as the implosion or dysfunctionality that's occurring within the Māori Party. Just another day in politics, though, in many ways.
But what you reported on Waitea, of course, was that the move to suspend the Te Tautokoro MP, Mariameno Kapakingi, which is a big move. It's happened before several times involving different parties, but it's a big move. But when will that critical decision, when is that AGM going to be held to see what the next step is on that front?
Well, it's still a few weeks away, the AGM, but it does seem like parties are mustering support, and ultimately it's going to be down to the eligible members and how they vote, not sort of commentary and rhetoric on social media or the like. It's a challenging time, but not unlike other parties have gone through in the past. I do take a bit of exception too, because media seem besotted by this internal conflict, or perceived, and really it's at times, again, just feels as though they're having a dig at anything that's going on and tell Māori that they can sniff controversy. The party has advanced a whole lot of positive kaupapa and failed to get traction for much of it through mainstream and widespread media coverage. But as soon as they can smell some blood in the water, the media circle like sharks. So that's a frustrating aspect of it.
We were pretty keen on the alliance split too, I can tell you, and some of the others that have happened. But I take your point. Liam, how serious is this both for the party and its prospects in holding on to those seats in your view? But also we might widen it and say again, you know, this is Labour trying to keep its numbers, I guess, for a change of government next year, and it will, as things stand, at the very least, need at least a supply and confidence agreement with Te Pāti Māori, and Te Pāti Māori may well say, thank you very much, we want some ministerial seats. But how closely will it be watching what's happening here as well?
Well, it's not fully within the control of the Labour Party, right? If you need someone, you need someone. It just means you have longer negotiations. And the last coalition negotiations it took a long time. Look, I don't think that the controversy is going to go away anytime soon. And while you may have taken the point, I reject the point. I think that any political party of this level of division is going to be completely harassed by the wolf pack of the media. Certainly National was when Jamie Lee Ross first started to raise his head. Labour's had its share of it. And, I think one important thing is that actually this is the first time that Te Pāti Māori has actually had a lot of scrutiny and criticism. In the past, it has been treated kind of with kid gloves a little bit by the media, who's been a bit more sensitive to it. And it's not as good at dealing with the media crisis and media criticism as other parties are, because it's got a lot less of it. But it will come through that learning curve, and it will be better at this for it. And I don't think it's going to affect how it's going to perform at the polls at all. In the 2023 cycle, the party had constant scandal, about things like donations.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. It's more whether what's happening, given the role of Iru Kapakingi, for example, in leading the Toi Te Tiriti movement. It's more whether what's happening here is going to impact its own prospects, not whether this is a controversy or a scandal.
Well, no, but it won't, right? Because we had those issues in 2023 cycle, and it tripled its seats. It got its best ever result. And small parties don't work the way big parties are. A leaking scandal within Labour can metastasize into something that's very toxic for the Labour Party, and the same for National, because those are parties whose core selling point is that they are institutional and ready to govern. Small parties are more about causes. And people who are voting for parties that are about causes are more interested in the cause than they are about the cohesion. And when it comes to have an election, especially in constituency seats like the Māori electorates, voters aren't going to care at all about the internal dynamics of the party or its problems. They will rally behind the party or the candidate to oppose their common enemy in the government.
Right.
And
All right.
They will thrive.
All right, excellent. Finally, Andrew Bailey's popped up again, having resigned following speaking of controversies around his visit to there was the visit to the winery and some comments he made to a worker, but then it was latterly he resigned, having agreed that he'd inappropriately touched in a moment of intense discussion a staffer. He's now popping his head up and saying he feels misled about what National didn't know at that time, and he wants to clear his name. What do you make of all this, Dale? Is it going to be signs of a bit of trouble ahead for the Prime Minister, perhaps with a disgruntled MP, or is it just going to be a quick hit?
You've got to know when to hold 'em or when to fold 'em. I don't think he read the cards very well. And, to be a good politician, you've got to be very attentive. And I think he fell for the sucker punch. And look, guys work hard for their reputations. When they're dashed, you can understand why they want to clear their name, get back into public favour. But it just seems a little Andrew who now.
And Liam, you mentioned one former National MP who became incredibly disgruntled and extremely bothersome for his leadership. But do we anticipate anything similar here, or is it a case where the Prime Minister said, "Look, I would have sacked him anyway," and that's the end of it?
Yeah, textbook case of how not to mount a political comeback, right? And whereas for Jamie Lee Ross it was incredibly toxic and scheme against the leader, here I think it's just a lack of political skill, right? The lack of political skill and judgment to come back and re-raise the issue like this, even if you feel like you regretted how you handled it. It just shows weakness. It just shows you're self-betraying as a person who buckled under pressure. When you thought you were innocent, it makes you look weak. It makes you look inept, and you're dredging the controversy back up. So, look, I think that if Andrew Bailey can't see how counterproductive this is for his own prospects, he shouldn't be in politics. He should. He's a talented guy. He's had success in other realms, but not everyone has that political gene, and I don't think he does.
He was actually getting quite a bit done in his portfolio, to be honest. There's a good few folk in the areas he was working on who were disappointed at his demise, but he made the call because of his own behaviour, so it's hard to sort of turn the clock back on that and say, yeah, but I didn't know this. Anyway, thank you both very much.
Politics is about being elected.
Yeah, yes, that's a fair point. Thank you, Liam here. Thank you, Dale Husband.